Hi class, my name is Alyssa Baez. This video discussion submission is for Chicano Studies from December 7th, 2019. This is the Chapter 6, Sonora Invaded, the Occupation of Arizona. I find this chapter very intriguing because of the sole fact that it is about the state of Arizona. The state we live in today originally belonged to the Mexican state of Sonora. Due to the Treaty of Hidalgo in the year 1848, Mexico ceded only the northern part of Arizona to the United States, but the southern region remained part of Sonora until 5 years later, in 1853, when possession switched hands to the United States once again. The frontier of Arizona has the Sonoran Desert in the southern region of the state. According to historical record, the Sonoran Desert was inhabited by natives for 10 millennia. The Gadsden Purchase, also known as Venta de la Mesilla, was a prevalent territorial expansion for the United States, resulting from the Treaty of Mesilla on June 8, 1854. The United States collected the land region of present-day southern Arizona and southwest New Mexico. Following a few years later, conflict between Sonorans and Euro-Americans began to develop when Apache raids began to get increasingly relentless, that the Sonorans accused the Euro-Americans of instigating and provoking the Apache to raid Sonora. Eastern companies invested considerable amounts of capital in silver mines because mining was the sole economic enterprise during this early period. The investment was undoubtedly accompanied by the lobbying of Washington, D.C. officials to station soldiers in Arizona to protect mines against the Apache tribe. In the year 1860, just over 70% of Tucson's population was Mexican. Most of the freight to and from Tucson traveled through Guaymas, Sonora. On average, the trip would take about 16 days of travel and cost about $80 a ton to transport cargo to and from San Francisco by ship. Arizona remained in the Sonoran orbit, using Mexican pesos as its currency. Now let's not forget that when Western expansion made it to Arizona, it was known to be the Wild Wild West. Arizona was known to be a lawless and violent place, especially when it came down to ethnicity. Although the Mexican authorities were well aware of the presence of racism, they would often refuse to extradite the alleged criminals. This led to major problems and even casualties, resulting in ongoing conflicts. Now, amongst those who belonged to the Mexican elites, race was a complex matter to deal with. Lower-class white people generalized racism, whereas elite whites were more selective in their prejudices, depending on their requirement for marital relations, defense, and/or business contacts. So with Sonora being right next door, trade was a necessity for their economic prosperity. Mexican elites did not take advantage of this vulnerability and permitted racism to run wild. Many of them were descendants of Criollos who arrived in Sonora and Chihuahua during the 18th century, and they considered themselves to be superior to the poor whites and even the darker-skinned Mexicans. Moreover, many prized their contacts with white power brokers As in New Mexico, a number of Mexicans in Arizona prospered under U.S. colonialism. Arizona was just beginning to pop off, so keep in mind an evolutionary transformation was in need. The United States federal government tended to promote cattle trade. However, numbers in cattle remained low due to the constant battling of Apache raids. When the railroad came west, the 1877 Desert Land Act altered this type of trade and accelerated Arizona's transformation from commercial to industrial capitalism. Mining was also a prevalent industry in the economy, but then a few decades later commercial farming became a more popular mode of growth and prosperity. Similar to mining, commercial farming went from small to big, with absentee owners and managers running all the operations. By changing and diverting sources of water, commercial farmers and ranchers drove out small independent farmers, which allowed them to gain monopoly over the water resources. Under the Federal Reclamation Act, the Roosevelt Dam was constructed with the hope that water can be used for irrigating fields in the desert to create a bigger class of small farmers, but not to any surprise, big planters monopolized the land. Thank you.